Hello everyone, and welcome to yet another episode in the series of things you may have missed in The Witcher 3. We are just short of 8 years since the release of the game, and yet we've still got interesting things to talk about. Now, before we begin, I'd like to quickly plug my Witcher Details playlist. It has well over 100 videos that may interest you if you're into that sort of thing, and assuming you haven't watched them already. But even if you have, I hope I'll be able to show you something cool in this one. So without further lollygagging, let's begin. At number 1, we have something about vampires.
Vampires!
What?
According to the books, higher vampires should not have reflections in mirrors, and neither should they cast shadows. This is specifically in relation to Regis. Actually, towards the end of Blood and Wine, if you choose to take Syanna's path, he even has a small remark in front of her mirror.
Mirror, mirror on the wall. I despise these things.
Nothing under the carpet.
However, if you look at Regis, you'll see that contrary to what we just said, he actually casts a shadow. Same with Dettlaff, even in their transitional and full bat forms. Orianna has a shadow. The Unseen Elder himself, even if it's a little hard to spot. Lesser vampires like Alps, Garcanes and Catacans also have shadows. But with all that said, Bruxae actually don't cast shadows. I checked on multiple occasions and they simply don't have a shadow. I guess this further fuels the debate on whether Bruxae are or aren't higher vampires. You can hear more about it in my Details about Orianna video, as well as the video on who is and isn't a higher vampire. But we're not done with the shadows yet. You know how the Bruxa from Corvo Bianco wore a hood in her human form? And oftentimes, usually at night, you can see similar looking hooded women wandering the streets. Some of you guys have been asking me about whether all of these are Bruxae in disguise, and I was never sure about it. I suppose I've always doubted it. Maybe some, but not all. And if we put their shadows to the test, it seems that they do indeed have shadows like regular people. Now, you will probably say that it's just because they use regular human models who normally have shadows, and that the devs only removed the shadows from the vampire form of the Bruxa. And that would be a fair assumption, that's what I initially thought. However, I found something interesting. You remember the lesbian Bruxa? Well, in her human form, which at first looks like any other hooded woman, she does not cast a shadow. Now that I think is an awesome detail, and a way to foreshadow her identity before you've even found the body or read the notes. Also, I should add that CDPR are usually quite good with their shadowy details. You might remember that if you never do Ceres' quest in Skellige, for example, way later in the very ending of the game, you can see that Udalric still has the Heim's shadow on him. But anyway, tell me what you think about these vampires and these shadowy matters, and let's move on. At number 2, I'd like to bring up The Witcher 2. There's a tiny reference in The Witcher 3 to a quest in Roach's path from the second game. And I shall have to thank a viewer of mine by the name of Doboshing for bringing it to my attention. It's when you meet Sarah, the godling, in the basement of the haunted house.
Boo!
There is a point in the conversation where she talks about how scary and bad dreams are actually a lot of fun, and that's why she's giving them to Corinne. And before Geralt interrupts her, she briefly starts talking about a dream she's had where she was being chased by a giant hen.
Scary dreams are great. What I love is when this big hen chases me. Hen's got these red...
Why do you live in a haunted house?
Now this has got to be a reference to the dream, hallucination, vision thing that Geralt can have in the second game, where he also briefly sees a giant hen in a forest of, I'm tempted to say cocks, but it's a forest of so-called mushrooms.
I've been having this vision of a giant hen among mammoth mushrooms for weeks.
So it's quite fitting that they reference it precisely in the quest with Corinne Tilly, and if you're not careful, you can easily miss it. Like I have been for 6 or 7 years. Not sure how long it's been since I played The Witcher 2 for the first time. I actually played it after 3, and then I read the books, and then I played Witcher 1, and I never stopped playing 3. which you should know very well, so let's continue. At number 3, I'd like to revisit something that I've mentioned in my details in Skellige video, but back then I didn't know all the details. So there is this side quest in Harviken called Price of Honor. It's a grim and unfortunate story of this man's brothers failing to keep his future wife safe and then choosing to kill themselves rather than live in shame and guilt.
Chose to die instead of living with the knowledge they'd let down their brother.
In my old video, I mentioned a couple of details about the location of the dead brothers and the small follow-up several days later, where the living brother can be found mourning the death of his wife, or should I say betrothed. But what I didn't know back then is that you can actually find her dowry. It's underwater in the ship's wreckage, and you can choose to give it to her man or pretend you didn't find it and simply sell it.
Also found your fiancé's dowry. Small comfort, but still.
Thanks. Few men would be so honourable. Fare ye well.
A letter? That's all that's left of them.
Sorry, didn't find anything else.
Sadly, you barely get anything from it, so if you wish to sell something for good profit, you should probably look elsewhere. Alright, let's move on. Actually, let's go back to the beginning of the game, right after you finish Vizima and arrive in Velen. There are a few things I'd like to tell you about when you first visit the inn at the Crossroads. First off, there are a couple of small events that foreshadow the arrival of the Baron's men. There is a father who sends his daughter running into the woods.
Run to the woods. Wait there till I come get you. Understood?
Yes, Da.
Go! Quick, now!
And later, if you don't kill the Baron's men, we see that he did the right thing.
You've got a young daughter, Gramps. I know.
Search where you will.
One of these days, you'll not hide her in time. Hear me? And you'll watch every lad in the unit shag her senseless.
And there's also this couple who either hides or slaughters their pig so that it too does not get taken.
What are you doing, you fool? You'll not get her away in time.
I'll not give her up, not on me life!
They hear her squealing. They'll kill us and take her all the same.
So I'll slaughter her myself, hide her corpse neath the floorboards. Those bastards won't have her!
All right. We'll cover the blood.
Be gone! This has naught to do with you!
Leave this place, sir.
Talk of a pig's you hiding.
Them's lies, sir.
That's so. Let's have a look.
Now back to the father and daughter for a bit. I've had multiple people tell me that she gets eaten by the wolves if you don't follow her. Now this is partially true, but not really. There are occasions where she just runs to the woods and starts cowering without anything attacking her, but there are times when she gets attacked and killed along the way. However, in those cases, she gets back up a few moments later. Similar to how Gontaro Dim got up after you killed him with the beehives. And this is different from when the woman who eats her husband gets killed, for example. More about that in one of my previous videos. And finally, what is probably the best piece of evidence is that much later you can return to the place and find the old couple by their house, tending a pig. The father is by his house as well, and the woman walks around who looks just like his daughter. I think she even enters the house, so she has to have survived.
Oi, white knob.
Now back to the old couple again. I believe that initially this encounter was supposed to play out in a different order, because you first see them coming out of the inn, but then when you enter, they're actually on one of the tables inside.
Pour me another, love!
You've had enough.
No wench will ration my vodka! Pour, damn it!
I suppose this may be a rather unfortunate case of reusing both of their models, but I don't think it's just a coincidence. In fact, the man seems quite determined to get drunk, so this scene was probably meant to occur after they've lost their pig to the Baron's men. And another curious thing about this conversation is that it's no longer available after the Baron's men arrive. So if you don't want to miss it, talk to them as soon as you enter. Okay, and one more thing here, which again supports my hypothesis that this whole scenario was probably a little different at some point, is that there is a rather lengthy conversation with the innkeep which was cut from the game. For this, I'll have to thank a viewer of mine by the name of Anasnasim8513, and above all, the creators of the Brothers in Arms mod, for allowing us to access this conversation. It is currently triggered as soon as you talk to the innkeep.
Greetings. Got any beer?
And it offers a lot of exposition and world building, mostly about the state of Velen in relation to Nilfgaard and Redania. And I must say it's a shame that it got cut out. While I can see how it stretches the pacing, it offers a lot of valuable information that could have at least been included in the optional dialogue with the same person after you deal with the Baron's men. Now, the cut conversation is about 3 minutes long, so I'll play it in the end of the video for those of you who are interested, but I do recommend hearing it. I also left a link to the mod in the description. The file is in the optional section because the content was clearly removed on purpose, which is evident by the abrupt transition between the cut dialogue and the default scene. And speaking of removed content, we are moving on to another couple of things which were not originally part of the old generation of the game. And both are about Roach. First off, you can now run over stuff. Just start galloping and aim Roach directly into your target, and instead of just pushing it to the side a little bit, like it was in the old gen, you now cause it to stagger and even take some damage.
No!
It's barely noticeable against higher level opponents, but the lower level ones take decent hits, and some of them can even get one shot that way. The next curious change in the next gen is related to the dismount animations. They now change dynamically based on which way your camera is positioned. He can even do the backflip if you look backwards, which was something very rare in the old generation. It happened only in very narrow places. And by the way, for both of these Roach details, I shall have to thank viewers of mine. For the running over things, Gabor Kalai, 2112. YouTube started putting these numbers after names. By the way, he also thought that there's a rare piece of dialogue if you run over an animal, but sadly I never ran into it. No pun intended. And for the dismounting animations, a gentleman by the name of AKBLT, who even posted a video about it. Finally, while on the topic of viewers and changes in the next gen, I have for you one more sneaky fix that CD Projekt Red tried to do, in an attempt to prevent us from escaping the prison in Toussaint. This one is brought to you by a viewer called Marzipan, I believe, who managed to find a way to circumvent the new changes and escape anyway. I wasn't even aware of the changes since I haven't tried escaping in next gen. So, you remember how the devs added all these invisible walls and death zones to prevent us from roaming around with Ciri? Well, in the old gen, you could climb the scaffold here in Beauclair prison and jump over the wall. Now it turns out that in next gen they've added death zones around the wall, causing you to instantly die even if you don't fall from a significant height. However, the death caused by these zones can be avoided if you pop the decoction that makes you briefly immune to damage. You have to do it manually from your inventory, by the way, but basically as soon as you start falling and before you've touched the death zone, open your inventory, drink the decoction, and you're done. Sadly, you do get kind of stuck if you do this because you won't be able to finish your quest, and therefore you won't have access to your gear, and also fast traveling is disabled while on the quest. So if you choose to do it, you'll have to find ways of getting new weapons and new armor, and you will also be restricted to blood and wine content only, since without fast travel you can't really leave the place. Unless you start New Game Plus, I guess. But I suppose it makes for a nice challenge. You know, maybe rush through the main story and then try to do all the side quests after escaping prison. By the way, if you're not sure how to get there in the first place, it happens during any of the endings of Blood and Wine where Sienna dies.
A shame.
Sienna!
And on that cheerful note, I believe I'm done for now. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to give it a like and let me know how you feel about everything I've said in it. Other than that, thank you very much for watching, even after all these years. Special thanks to my supporters and YouTube members, and until the next video, stay tuned and be good.
Greetings. Got any beer?
The black ones burned down the brewery, so I've got some charred oak spirit.
This the inn at the Crossroads?
'Tis indeed. Novigrad Road went through here, but armies and bandits, that's all that's on him now.
The black ones have brought you some grief.
No more than the Redanians. Same beast to my eyes. Red stole our grain, said it were for the brave lads dying as they defend the northern realms. Black ones now make us give up what we stashed from the Reds, say the Emperor will bring peace, but that comes at a price. And when they clashed, red against black, corpse eaters came to feast on the dead. Scimitars and Strixons crept from the woods, sniffing for carrion. Howls so fierce these days that folk daren't leave their huts come night.
Novigrad a long way off?
Not that long. But with the Redanians just the other side of the Pontar, you'll not get there without a pass. When we had hunger here, the pox, folk tried to flee there. Reds turned them back, or drowned them in the river.
Nothing on the spit.
We've naught to eat, that's certain.
Food's gotten scarce.
Folk venture into the fields before sunup to catch frogs, gather acorns, grind them into flour. Whosoever's got a hand don't sleep nights so he can watch his bird.
Can't your dogs do that?
One night, a few weeks back, Temerian grillers crept from the forest. They snuck between the huts, clubs in hand. Dogs bayed and barked, then howled and yelped, and then fell silent as the grave. That rabble then gathered near the old pits. I saw 'em. Built fires, salted the meat. Only the wildest of hounds about now. The kind that don't come near men. Except when hunger drives them to attack, that is.
Many strangers come through here?
I'll not prattle about other folk. Suppose you're a tongue wagger, it'll only bring me grief.
I want to know about travelers, not locals.
They come, they go. I don't want trouble with locals or travelers.
Who rules these lands now? Nilfgaard?
Black ones are garrisoned nearby, but they're still too weak to rule. So they struck a deal with the Baron. Man's a puppet of sorts, but it's clear they promised him something in return. If he had his way, he'd serve no man but himself.
A Baron?
Aye. A righteous man, and a just lord. Can't say an ill word about him.
Got a family name for me?
I don't know about families, but I'm not saying ill word about him or them.
Wouldn't dream of making you badmouth him. Just want to know a little more. He ruled for long?
Not long, and you'll have to be content with that. I'll say no more.
Looking for a man. Goes by Hendrik.
What do you want with him?
Want to talk to him.
What about?
Give me a bottle of something strong.